G'day, ZiggyD here. In this video I'm going to be going through the mechanics of ball lightning, hopefully clearing up some of the confusion regarding these mechanics, and also giving you guys some suggestions on how to potentially build with this rad new skill. It is a very cool new skill. Now let's start off with the basics. Whenever you cast ball lightning, it casts a slow moving ball of lightning, as the name would suggest. Now, it is tagged with lightning, projectile, spell, and AoE. The lightning and spell are the ways that you scale the damage, so you can scale it by increasing elemental or lightning damage, or you can scale it by increasing spell damage. There are a few other ways which I'll get into in a moment, but those are the base ways you will scale damage exactly, like damage specifically, through the passive tree. Now, it is tagged as a projectile, but that is only for the purposes of projectile movement speed. So I'm talking faster projectile and slower projectiles, in addition to multiple projectiles, so lesser multiple projectiles and greater multiple projectiles. Now, the reason for this is that although this ball that fires out is actually itself a projectile, but it will never hit an enemy. So that means it cannot fork, it cannot chain, and it doesn't actually deal projectile damage. It doesn't have a projectile that hits the enemy. So don't attempt to scale this with projectile damage, essentially. Now, it also, on top of that, has an area of effect. It has an AoE field, so things like increased area of effect can be effective. However, it does not deal AoE damage. The area of effect only signifies how far these little bolts that arc out and hit enemies can actually arc out. So let's say if a ball lightning is in the center of this waypoint, and we imagine the area of effect to be the outside area of this, then that is where it will zap enemies in. Increasing the AoE allows you to increase this. And now is a perfect time for me to transition over to some awesome diagram action. Now, you guys, I'm sure, could not even contain yourselves over the fantastic nature of this diagram action that's about to befall you. But let's do some explanation of possibly the most confusing mechanic about this, and that is that mobs can only be struck from the same cast of ball lightning once every 200 milliseconds. So essentially, as ball lightning travels, let's say a monster is here, as the ball lightning travels past it, it sits in its area of effect. Now, every 200 milliseconds, a little zap of lightning will travel out from the central ball and hit the monster, so it'll go zap and hit that guy just there. Now, it does its damage each time that happens. Now, this is just an arbitrary number, but let's say it takes 1 second for the AoE of the ball to travel from this point to this point, so to travel this way and then leave the mob. If it takes 1 second for that to happen, the mob will get hit 5 times. So that's pretty simple. Now, what's really important is this fact that just here, it can only hit enemies from the same cast once every 200 milliseconds. So that means if you're using lesser multiple projectiles or greater multiple projectiles and those AoE fields are overlapping, let's say there is a monkey sitting right here. Now, technically he's in the AoE field of 2 different ball lightnings just here from your single cast. So this is, your 3 ball lightnings that came out from an LMP cast. Now, this mob should be getting hit by twice as many bolts of lightning, so every 200 milliseconds you would think it'd be getting hit by 2, essentially, so doubling the damage you take because it's getting hit by 2 projectiles, essentially, or 2 ball lightnings, essentially. But this is actually not the case. There's a restriction on this that each one of these ball lightnings falls under the category of same cast. One casting motion of the caster casted these 3 separate ball lightnings. So that means this mob will only get hit by 1 arc every 200 milliseconds and it cannot double up. So hopefully that's clear. Now, what is different though is that when you start to remove this same cast effect, you can start to overlap things. Now, let's say this one here is just normal casting with, let's say, normal cast speed. You'll see that there's no real overlap in the AoE fields there because the ball lightnings are too far away from each other. However, if we then go ahead and switch up, if I actually disable and enable the correct things just here, let's use the increased area of effect gem just here. Now, by increasing the area of effect, we've been able to overlap the fields. I know my diagrams are a bit dodgy, but hopefully this gets it across. There's a mob sitting here. He can be hit twice as often now because these are all separate casts. These were 3 separate casting actions from the caster, from the player, and any mob in the overlapping AoE fields will be hit twice as many times. So this guy, over the course of 1 second, theoretically, if he's still staying in the AoE fields of each ball for 1 second, will be hit 20 times instead of 10 times. Essentially, he's going to be hit twice as often. So hopefully that's nice and clear. Let's go ahead and remove these and put the original ones back on. So that's what you can do with increased AoE. You can essentially overlap those fields a little bit more effectively. Now, we can also achieve the same thing with faster cast speed, so we might be using faster casting and the new Echo support gem. And by doing that, we're able to overlay the fields again, so making the balls closer to each other. These are all still separate class, and each one of them can arc onto mobs as long as they stay within the AoE field. Each individual ball can only arc every 200 milliseconds, but when you have two balls arcing that same mob, you can hit twice as often. And even if you get enough faster casting and then overlay some increased AoE as well, then we can start to get a lot of overlap. You can see the darker fields here are the ones where there's like actually 3 different ball lightnings overlapping with each other. So a mob here will only get zapped by 1 every 200 milliseconds, a mob here will get zapped by 2 balls every 200 milliseconds, 3 balls, and then finally 4 balls at once for a mob standing just here. So this is using increased AoE, faster casting, echo, and all that sort of jazz. Now, obviously these fields are not actual measurements. These are just supposed to facilitate your thought and understanding of this particular skill. But this is essentially what I think most people are going to be aiming for in very effective ball lightning builds. Now, I think people will use less multiple projectiles for the same reason people use less multiple projectiles on Spectral Throw. Spectral Throw doesn't shotgun, just like ball lightning. It essentially has exactly the same restriction, but increasing your AoE potential, like your ability to clear out larger packs, is still pretty beneficial. So I can still see LMP being added because it gives you this much AoE instead of maybe this much AoE, say the width of the carpet just here. And I know from having played a Glacial Cascade build recently, even with a lot of increased AoE on that, having like a rectangular area of effect in Path of Exile results in pretty slow clear speed. It just doesn't feel very good. So I can still see less multiple projectiles being pretty effective. But what's going to be the most effective support gems? Lightning penetration is an obvious one. Any lightning spell is going to be using lightning penetration. But we have faster casting, so which will cause those ball lightnings to get a little bit closer together. So we're probably having the AoE field slightly overlapping there. And then if we add in increased area of effect, they're going to be overlapping by even more. And then if we also add in spell echo, these are all level 1 gems as well. You can see how close these guys get. This is a character with only 6% cast speed from the tree. This is the only cast speed node I have just here, I'm pretty sure. So, maybe a little bit more, but very little actual faster casting on this character itself. So, with leveling these gems up and getting faster casting on your character, having these balls almost touch each other means that the AoE field's going to overlap maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe even 5 times if you get enough increased AoE and faster casting. And this is going to be the most effective DPS setup. Well, technically there's probably one more thing you can do on top of that, and that is slower projectiles. I mentioned how you can modify the projectile travel speed. Adding slower projectiles in doesn't make the balls any closer together, but it does increase the amount of time that mobs spend in those AoE. You'll see that the balls are ending sooner, so they're barely even reaching the edge of my screen just there. But the fact that they're traveling slower means the area of effect, let's pretend this brazier just here is a mob. The balls are spending more time over the top of that mob zapping it. So I think some people might use slow projectiles. That's technically the highest DPS setup, would be something like Spell Echo, increased area of effect, faster casting, slower projectiles, and then obviously something like lightning penetration, though I potentially see things like Empower and stuff adding more actual DPS. But in terms of scaling with this AoE and this overlapping effect, that's going to be the biggest setup just there. Now, instead, if you want to use faster projectiles, that will decrease the amount of DPS each ball does to each mob as they travel over them faster, but it does give you more speed. You know, it travels further off screen, so you can essentially off screen. I think I can, I can even off screen right up to that top corner there with faster projectiles. So if you want a little bit, same sort of deal as Spectral Throw, really. If you want to off screen mobs to be a bit safer in hardcore, then faster projectiles might be popular just there. Now, a few other things we'll probably see a bit of use. This is going to be the core setup, I think. Self-casting ball lightning is probably going to be the most popular, but you can definitely use trap and multi-trap. Now, the way this interacts with this 200 milliseconds restriction just there is that each trap counts as a separate cast. So if I put down only one trap, even though it releases many ball lightnings, the AoE fields, even if they overlap, will still only zap each mob once every 200 milliseconds. However, if I use multi-traps and throw down 3 traps, if all 3 of these are set off at the same time and the balls overlap and there's lots of overlapping AoE fields, they will each trap casted ball lightning. So let's say each one's casting 5 from GMP or 3 ball lightnings. Let's just say you're using LMP and it's casting 3 ball lightnings each. If you're overlapping, each trap will count as a separate cast. This is because these traps actually count as entities or casters within the game. So the trap is essentially becoming me. It's as if I was casting 3 sets of ball lightnings using trap and multi-trap. I don't know how effective trap and multi-trap is going to be, but it's something that might see a bit of use, and it's something you can maybe tinker around with on your trap builds. Spell Totem might also see some use. Every cast by Spell Totem is the same, counts as a separate cast, and if you are using Spell Totem, if Spell Totem is casting Ball Lightning and you are casting Ball Lightning, you can overlap those fields and they count as separate casts because they're coming from 2 separate entities. So, I think that covers everything, guys. There's a few other things. I think quality on Ball Lightning gives 1% lightning damage per quality, so getting up to 20% extra lightning damage is going to be nice with, you know, a quality ball lightning. Not a major deal. And I can see obviously things like empowering and overleveling and vialing your ball lightning to increase that will increase your damage by a good deal as well. But I think I covered everything. If you have any questions about this skill, I have had a fair bit of a play around with it, and also a talk to the devs about its design and how it all works, so feel free to ask in the comments below. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.